a version of every story that makes sense at first glance. The polished narrative handed down by officials, the simplified tale that fits neatly into headlines and lets society exhale before scrolling to the next tragedy. The official version, the easy to swallow explanation, the one people nod along to and promptly move on from, assuming justice served or mystery mundane. But when you, the skeptic, the true crime aficionado, the podcaster with a hammer in hand, start pulling it apart piece by deliberate piece, you begin to see the shaky framework underneath. It is like inspecting a construction site gone awry. Every calculated choice by the builder turned killer. Every fleeting moment frozen in time. Every seemingly trivial detail aligns like bricks mortared one atop the next to form a deceptive wall. And when you peer even closer, armed with files, forensics, and hindsight, those bricks shift, cracks spiderweb across the surface. Details refuse to line up under scrutiny. Motives twist into labyrinthine webs far beyond impulse or rage. And the truth emerges not clean or cinematic, but gritty, fragmented, and profoundly unsettling. This is Killer Constructions, where we deconstruct cold cases layer by layer, exposing the rotten beams and hidden rebar of real evil. Today's build is the Bear Brook murders, a hunter's 1985 find in New Hampshire woods that snowballed into serial horror, unsolved for decades until DNA genealogy rewrote the blueprint. Time alters narratives in subtle, insidious ways rarely noticed at first. It softens razor-sharp details into vague recollections, erodes jagged edges as alibis blur and memories fade, transforming visceral immediacy into remote abstraction. Memories dim with age, eyewitnesses relocate, forget or die. Evidence succumbs to entropy, rust, and root intrusion. Communities move forward, archiving the unsolved amid 200,000 plus United States cold cases. That temporal drift often enables stories to vanish entirely, consigned to dusty boxes. The longer resolution eludes, 15, 30, 40 years. The harder clarity becomes, urgency evaporating like dew. Obvious leads ossify into doubts. Pressing puzzles become footnotes. Yet some cases defy entropy, lingering incomplete, primed for revival via technology like investigative genetic genealogy. Bear Brook exemplifies this. 4 victims in barrels, perpetrator unmasked post-mortem. We will stack the facts brick by brick. November 10th, 1985. The catalyst ignites deep in Bear Brook State Park, a 27 square mile wild tract of oak pine forest, boulder fields and wetlands on Allenstown's edge in southern New Hampshire. Remote, rugged terrain crisscrossed by 40 miles of trails, but riddled with untouched thickets ideal for concealment. No bustling recreation hub. Hunters stalked white-tailed deer in fall. Hikers dodged mud in summer. But interior stayed pristine, patrolled sporadically. Local Terry Evans, bow hunting off-trail amid rustling leaves, spotted an anomaly 300 yards from Blue Hill Road. A blue 55-gallon steel drum, 35 inches tall and 23 inches diameter, approximately 400 pounds empty, half buried, rusted, incongruous amid ferns. No hiker trash. This screamed deliberate dump. Evans flagged police. New Hampshire state troopers cordoned a 100-yard perimeter. Bolt cutters revealed horror. 2 sets of skeletonized remains in black trash bags over hyperlon sheeting blue tarp material. Adult female Jane Doe, number 1, 23 to 33 years old. 5 feet 5 inches, brown reddish hair, gap teeth. Toddler girl Jane Doe, number 2, 2 to 4 years old, blonde. Autopsies by Dr. Jenny Duval. Closed skull blunt force trauma. Deaths 2 to 10 years prior. 1980 range estimated, packed post-decomposition to mask odor and time. No identifications via fingerprints, FBI negative. Dentals no matches. Clothing too generic. Levi's scarves. 1985 forensics primitive. No mitochondrial DNA yet. No CODIS. Scene yielded trace fibers plastics, but leads evaporated. Case shelved as double homicide. Park patrolled harder. 1985, DNA forensics was embryonic, not routine in United States investigations, until Dr. Alec Jeffreys developed profiling in 1988, and the CODIS database launched in 1998. Identification hinged on antiquated methods. Dental x-rays cross-checked against over 100,000 missing persons files through the precursor to NAMUS. Fingerprints via AFIS, which was nascent at the time, skeletal metrics, and tips from family or acquaintances via NCIC. The Bear Brook, Jane Does yielded nothing. No dental matches in New Hampshire or Vermont databases. No fingerprints due to decomposition. Clothing too generic like the child's Oshkosh overalls and the adult's blue jeans. No families claim matches, despite media alerts in the Boston Globe and WMUR-TV. The 1-800 tip line stayed silent. Anonymity erected insurmountable walls. Nameless victims meant no disappearance timelines, no relational webs, no motive vectors, or suspect pools. How did they reach Allenstown? Were there vehicle traces? Was the killer local or transient? The case stagnated in Trooper Maurice Tanker's file amid New Hampshire's 300 annual homicides backlog. It reopened sporadically. 1995 ground-penetrating radar found nothing. 1998 FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit consult described an organized offender committing family disposal, but technology lagged far behind. It became known as the Drum Case, one of over 250,000 United States cold cases, with evidence vaulted at Concord Police Department. Time calcified it further. Fast forward to May 9th, 2000. Park forester Bob Evans cleared brush 75 to 100 yards from the first site and unearthed an identical blue drum with a friction-fit lid that was pried open. Inside were the remains of 2 more girls wrapped in Hyperlon sheeting and trash bags. Deaths from blunt force trauma in the 1980 range. Jane Doe number 3 was estimated 1 to 3 years old, 30 to 34 inches tall with blonde hair. Doe number 4 was 2 to 4 years old, 3 feet 1 inch tall with brown hair. The proximity of the drums and identical concealment method screamed serial handiwork, not a coincidence in a 15,000-acre woods. The scope of the case exploded. What was a single dump now revealed quadruple family murders, with the offender returning to the same dump site. New Hampshire Attorney General's cold case unit activated. The FBI joined and profiled it as familicide by a nomadic killer. The drums traced to a common Manchester area supplier with no useful serial numbers. The remains went to a University of New Hampshire anthropologist, but identities remained elusive. Media frenzy dubbed them the Bear Brook Barrel victims. Tips surged but hit 0 solid leads. The sites linked officially in 2001, the offender unknown, but the pattern screamed female adult plus 3 kids, non-sexual violence with domestic hallmarks. This linkage only deepened the identification crisis. No names meant no timelines. The case stalled until forensics evolved. Short tandem repeat DNA emerged in the 1990s, mitochondrial DNA in the 2000 range. Uploads to CODIS and FBI databases yielded nothing since no relatives existed there. Partial profiles generated in 2003 using precursors to modern labs like Othram, but no familial matches surfaced. The decade crawled forward. In 2015, Parabon Nanolabs predicted phenotypes showing Caucasian females. The breakthrough came with investigative genetic genealogy, pioneered after the 2013 GED match privacy policy shift. Unlike direct CODIS matches covering only 0.5% of the population, investigative genetic genealogy uploads crime scene DNA to consumer sites like Ancestry, 23andMe, MyHeritage, and GEDmatch, with over 1 million users, yielding third or fourth cousins through autosomal single nucleotide polymorphisms. Investigators then build family trees, triangulate relatives, subpoena records and birth certificates, confirm identities through short tandem repeat testing. The Bear Brook team, including New Hampshire Attorney General, FBI, and DNA Doe Project, uploaded samples from 2017 to 2018. By June of 2019, they hit the Honeychurch line through California cousins. The process involved raw FASTQ files processed into single nucleotide polymorphism arrays, matching clusters, building trees from Honeychurch's Eastern Virginia roots, narrowing suspects, and confirming through exhumations and tests. This method revolutionized over 100 Jane Doe cases since then. Using these methods, investigators were eventually able to identify the adult woman as Marlice Elizabeth Honeychurch, not Denise Bowden. Honeychurch had been living in New Hampshire in the early 1980s and was last seen in 1978. At the time of her disappearance, she was living with her boyfriend Rasmussen, who was using an alias Clark. After she was last seen, he left the area with 2 children believed to be her daughters Marie and Sarah. Her disappearance had not been fully resolved, and for decades there had been no confirmed explanation for what had happened to her. The identification of Honeychurch provided a critical connection and allowed investigators to begin examining the individuals associated with her. Denise Bowden was a separate victim, linked later. Living with Rasmussen as Bob Evans in 1980, vanished November 1981 with daughter Lisa, who survived abandoned in 1986. The identification of the children required additional time and analysis. Through genetic genealogy, investigators determined that the children found in the barrels were related to each other and to a man who would later be identified as Terry Peter Rasmussen. One of the children was confirmed to be Rasmussen's biological daughter, Rhea. The others were also connected through DNA, Marie and Sarah, daughters of Honeychurch. Their maternal identities were more complex to establish. This process required extensive work, including the construction of detailed family trees, the elimination of potential matches, and the verification of each connection through additional testing and records. Extensive work included 10,000 relatives mapped, 100 false paths eliminated. As these identities were established, investigators began to reconstruct the relationships and timelines associated with the victims. This process revealed patterns that had not been visible before. Central to these patterns was Terry Peter Rasmussen, a man who had used multiple aliases and lived in various locations over the years. Rasmussen's use of different identities allowed him to establish new lives in different communities, often forming relationships that appeared normal on the surface. However, these relationships were frequently short-lived, and in several instances, individuals connected to him disappeared. Rasmussen, born 1943, Tacoma, Washington, Navy, 1961 to 1965, first family abandoned 1970. Rasmussen was known to have used several aliases, including Bob Evans and Curtis Kimball. Under these identities, he moved between states such as New Hampshire, California, and Texas. Each move created a break in the continuity of his life, making it difficult for investigators to track his activities in real time. This pattern of movement was not unusual on its own, but when viewed in connection with the victims, it became significant. In multiple instances, Rasmussen was associated with individuals who were later unaccounted for, and these associations aligned with gaps in his timeline. Aliases enabled resets. Kimball arrested in 1985 Texas, Evans with Honeychurch, Jensen killed Unsun June, 2001. One of the key connections involved Denise Bowden. At the time of her disappearance, Rasmussen was living with her under an assumed name Bob Evans. After she was last seen in November 1981, he left the area with a child believed to be her daughter Lisa. He later appeared in different states with that child, continuing to use aliases and establish new identities. This pattern of forming relationships and then leaving without explanation was consistent across multiple instances in his life. However, because these events occurred in different locations and under different names, they were not initially connected. Lisa abandoned 1986 Manchester YWCA survived foster care. Investigators later reconstructed Rasmussen's timeline by combining various sources of information, including employment records, rental agreements, witness statements, and DNA evidence. This reconstruction revealed a consistent pattern of behavior. Rasmussen would establish a life in a particular location, often involving a relationship, and then leave, sometimes under circumstances that were not immediately suspicious. In some cases, individuals associated with him were never seen again. These patterns were not recognized at the time because each instance was isolated, but when viewed collectively, they formed a coherent sequence. Timeline: 1978. Honeychurch vanish. 1981. Bowden. 1986. Lisa abandoned. 2001. June murder. By the time Rasmussen was identified as the central figure in the Bear Brook case, he had already died. He passed away on December 28, 2010, while serving a prison sentence for an unrelated murder of Yoon Soon-jun. His death meant that investigators could not obtain a direct account of the events, and many details remain unknown. As a result, the case had to be understood through reconstruction. Investigators relied on physical evidence, documented timelines, and DNA connections to piece together a narrative that could explain the relationships between the victims and Rasmussen. Died Redondo Beach, California prison, age 67. The use of genetic genealogy in this case represented a significant advancement in investigative methods. It demonstrated the potential of DNA analysis, not only to identify individuals, but also to establish connections that would otherwise remain hidden. This approach has since been used in other cases, but the Bear Brook investigation is often cited as one of the earliest and most impactful examples of its effectiveness. It also highlighted the importance of preserving evidence, even when immediate identification is not possible, as future technologies may provide new opportunities for analysis. Bear Brook pioneered GED match used post-2017. Despite the progress made, there are still unanswered questions. The exact circumstances surrounding the deaths of the victims are not fully known, and without Rasmussen's account, some details may never be confirmed. However, the identification of the victims and the establishment of Rasmussen's involvement provide a level of resolution that was not possible for many years. The case demonstrates how time can both obscure and reveal information, delaying resolution while also allowing for the development of new investigative tools. 4 victims identified by 2025, killer linked posthumously. The Bear Brook murders case continues to be studied by law enforcement and forensic experts. It serves as a case study in the challenges of cold cases and the importance of persistence. Advances in DNA technology have not only brought closure to the families involved, but have also set a precedent for future investigations. The collaboration between law enforcement, genetic genealogists, and the public who shared DNA data was crucial to the outcome. Case study persistent cold case DNA revolution. In conclusion, the Bear Brook murders represent a tragic and complex case that spanned decades in multiple states. The identification of Terry Petter Rasmussen as the perpetrator and the victims as members of his family brought long-sought answers to investigators and the families affected. This case underscores the evolving nature of forensic science and the determination required to solve cold cases. It remains a poignant reminder of the impact of violence on families and the importance of seeking justice no matter how much time has passed. And when the dust finally settled, when the truth was laid bare, what remained wasn't just a crime. It was a structure built piece by piece, decision by decision, until there was no way out, because the most dangerous constructions aren't made of steel or concrete. They're built in the mind, brick by brick. Thank you for joining me on Killer Constructions. I'll see you in the next build.